22nd. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:09 on the 22nd of October. Welcome to the regular meeting of the North Quarter Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee. This meeting will be recorded and be available for public viewing, so please be aware that comments made will end up part of our final upload to YouTube. I have not received any disclosures of pecuniary interest, but will remind everyone to declare if one does arise through the meeting. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe. Colonial culture and relationship with our lands and waters are simply not the same as that of our First Peoples. I remain committed to a life of learning in order to better understand that which may not come naturally to me. We all share a responsibility to be stewards of not just our own land, but of our communities at large. Moving into the agenda, looking for a mover for adoption. Moved by Ruth Ann, seconded by Ian. All those in favor? That is carried. Going into our minutes from the previous meeting. Oh, sorry. Are there any concerns from the minutes of our last meeting? No. If not, I'd be looking for a motion to receive those minutes. Moved by Shane, seconded by Ruth Ann. All those in favor? That is carried.
It's at adopt or receive.
Oh,
Usually
it's adopt, sure.
And I'm sorry, that was Shane and Ruth Ann?
Yeah. So now we can move into business. The short-term rental definition. I know that this has bounced around quite a few very well-qualified and professional brains. So what's being brought forward here is based on our sort of direction from last time. But again, I think this has gone through planning, legal. So any tweaks that are made from here, I would want to just confirm that we're not actually just going to be stepping backwards. So I'm glad that Laura's here. But are there any concerns based on the definition?
Fine with me. I'm good.
Okay. And a motion to accept and approve the draft definition for short-term rental accommodation and short-term rental. Moved by Ruth Ann, sorry.
Just gonna raise a point. It's not listed in the attachment to the recommendation, so I'm not sure how it gets packaged.
Yeah, so I don't know that committee is actually, I would say, as you mentioned, Chair, they're accepting the recommendation and perhaps it's just included with the recommendations for council approval. You could do it that way.
Just insert it.
Or you could recommend approval to council. Whichever you prefer, it could just be inserted into your recommendation final report.
What I was working on was, it would just be included as a definition on that specific recommendation to council. And then there's not having to jump back and forth between different documents to figure, oh, it's a.
So just insert it into the recommendations under
definitions, which would just be tucked right at the very back.
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
Okay.
So if I may, that committee accepts and approves the definition to be inserted into the final report to council. Yep. Is that right?
As an attachment.
Oh, sorry. I've got three screens here and I missed it. Janet?
Yeah, no, sorry. I was just wiping my face off. I agree.
Oh. AI did it.
Yeah.
AI gave you a hand.
Colin, you missed me when I raised my hand to move in second and you catch me when I'm wiping my face.
And I think the computer must have caught you with your hand.
Oh.
That now it's disappeared because for a while you had a little
Yeah.
emoji saying that you were trying to speak.
Okay, sorry.
No, all good. Revised draft.
And-
Oh,
And
sorry.
I'm really sorry that
No.
Ruth Ann moved that and,
Oh, seconded
I think he,
Ian.
oh,
I had my hand.
Oh,
up.
sorry, Ian's
Fine,
comment.
but I'm happy to second
That's
that.
fine.
Second. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter.
thank you.
Didn't
Sorry
want to
about that.
get adrift.
Second by Shane. And all those in favor? Or did you forget? Okay,
Everybody's good.
yeah,
You said seconded by Shane.
I thought that's what we settled with, but
Okay.
okay. Are you good to go, Connor?
Good to go. Thank you.
And moving into business item 2, our revised draft recommendations. Any original thoughts for first thoughts from members of the committee? I know,
Lots of good work in here.
It's Janet, I just want to thank Edward I'm pretty sure it was Edward for doing such a good job editing and cleaning it up and attaching links, which must have been a lot of hours of work. So just wanted to say that and acknowledge Edward's work on this draft.
I think I did a bit, but I would say that Connie did, I believe Connie did a fair amount of work, or Kelly as well
Okay.
on that document. So I don't want to take him record, so I think, yeah, towards the clerk on that.
okay,
I would, as I wrote some of this and read it a couple of times as it was put together. I can't, nothing comes to mind for me to change, but I'm concerned that we may have missed something. If anybody looks at it and there is, 2 things, that we missed something, if anybody looks at it and sees anything missing. The other piece would be, are we all agreed in terms of consensus on the recommendations as they're written here? Because I'm not sure about, I know Janet did a little piece of this as well, and I think you had a hand in another chunk of it. For me personally, I may have made some assumptions about what consensus was. I think I was okay, but if I didn't, now's the time that we need to catch that, I think, before it goes any further. If we need to change anything, or if there's anything else that needs another rediscussion.
the only thought, I'm just trying to find a specific line in here now, there's something with the ghost hotels that I absolutely agree that we need to be dealing with them, but. I'm not find where I had a little bit of concern, but we're maybe with the same one.
I would, yeah, with the ghost hotels and that, you could just take a number of guests at any time. For example, there's one just down from me, right? And it isn't a ghost hotel, right? And let's say you go in and find 5 bedrooms and 10 people. Can we actually do anything about that? Or sorry, 5 bedrooms and 16 people. Can bylaw go into there?
So it's. I know we've discussed it before, but I would want to make sure that the information is 100% accurate that you've been getting.
And, yeah,
And
I don't know how you could scrape it.
yeah,
The conversation I thought we had with Matt was that he needed sufficient information to support an investigation. And I would have expected Matt to have reviewed this. Was it reviewed by the building and planning department?
A copy was sent to both BAT and the CAO. I'm not sure if he had time to thoroughly review it, but my understanding is, for example, if it was brought to his attention by whatever means that perhaps there was a situation where there was only 2 bedrooms and 10 people in there, he could send a letter, but it wouldn't necessarily give him right of entry.
But he can request entry voluntarily, which is different than using his right of entry. If he sees 8 cars in driveway and knows it's only 2 bedroom, 1 bath.
And they could be just visiting for the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it starts to get hairy, but.
Yeah.
This was a very important part of the committee's deliberations around low hanging fruit and taking action on some of the most egregious.
We can ask Matt to come up and answer, if you have a few questions, that's not a problem.
I think there's another.
Our
piece of-
assumption is, sorry, go ahead.
So, we'll go to Janet just because it's harder to track online and then go to Shane afterwards. Sure.
Our assumption was opening an investigation, that there would be a lower barrier of proof than going to court. And I think that's what's reflected in the draft. And if there is that example of 10 people, 8 cars in a 2-bedroom, plus it was also advertised on VRBO as a, 16-person 2-bedroom, then that would be enough to open up an investigation. Would that not be the case?
Well, again, a letter would be sent to state that that information was available, but I don't believe it necessarily gives him right of entry. And I mean, if he asks for entry, it's a difficult one, but I'm gonna ask Matt to come up to the meeting.
And is it
So-
Matt or is it the fire department? That would have the right of entry.
Capacity would be mad in my mind.
Again, it's having the right of entry.
Yeah.
Would fire department ever have the right of entry?
Better question for
For
them.
that?
Yeah.
There
I
is
don't
also,
Yeah.
what we're talking about is reactive a little bit too. So on the basis of a complaint or somebody says, hey, there's 15 cars in this driveway. That's the reactive piece. I think what we've talked about in at least one of the meetings and what's been incorporated in the recommendations is more of a proactive approach. Where without a complaint, building could just take a look at Verbo, Airbnb, pick a platform. And just sift out, probably could see a half a dozen of those properties without spending a ton of resource. And that's the proactive piece. Then there's a decision, do you reach out to the property owner? Or do you start an investigation? I'm not really sure how that would work, but that's the proactive piece. And I think that's what we were after here in these recommendations as written. Was more that than the reactive.
I would also caution that, we're providing recommendations to council then direct staff. And there may be some reinterpretation or amendments to so that the staff direction may not 100% reflect our recommendations. I think that's understood. So I'm happy if we can be a little bit out there and leave it to council to direct staff. We're not directing staff, we're recommending to council.
Mhm.
The one line, I found the Ghost Hotel line that I wanted to tweak a little bit, and it is truly tweaking rather than rewriting it and changing the intent of it. The very start of page number 8 is the overuse of septic systems caused by Ghost Hotels guest load and laundry can elevate phosphorus levels of Sina Muskoka, triggering algae blooms and causing detriment to the health of the lakes. If we can sort of tidy that up a little bit, I think it's a little dangerous to try to point the finger at exactly what caused sort of the algae blooms beyond the elevated phosphorus level. It's like, I'd have a difficult time pointing specifically to Ghost Hotels when any overloaded septic system that could be a mom and pop rental that just got massively overused would be contributing to that. So I think I just wouldn't want to blame that whole specific instance on ghost hotels, but try to reword it so it's just overuse of septic systems has led to this in neighboring comparable municipalities. Rather than just saying ghost hotels are doing this.
So you just wanna cross out.
Ghost
upgrades
hotels.
here, Caused by ghost hotel.
Yeah, so the overuse of septic systems.
And
Actually,
then
it's caused by ghost hotels, we just take that out, that would tidy it up to the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'd be looking for.
the assumption is you go to the low hanging fruit, and the low hanging fruit is whoever is overusing septic.
Yeah.
Likely ghost hotels if they're, 365.
Yeah, but it's, we don't wanna lose sight of a non-ghost hotel
Mhm.
overusing their septic, cause that would of course be a concern still too. But it was very, very well done, Connie.
You mentioned other municipalities. Do you want Muskoka replaced with other municipalities or leave Muskoka in?
I think the citation came from Muskoka.
If we were mentioning Muskoka, what I would wanna do is add the citation as a document at the bottom.
Okay, I'll have to find it, but that's where it came from.
Because it is
I'll
a
get to
statement of
Edward.
a fact that I think is worth backing up for council.
And don't want to lose sight of the major why we're doing this. This is our future, our legacy is the health of our lakes. You guys just froze in council chambers. Okay, now you're back.
Actually, Matt, are you able just to comment and make it clear, because it's, we think that we know about capacity limits, enforcement around that, but again, just need to be 100% confident if we're gonna be submitting something to council here. I remember there's a discussion about your ability to enter properties and you needing actual evidence to be able to enter the property, and 12 vehicles in the middle of the day wouldn't necessarily mean that there's 24 people sleeping in the building. So with specific focus on capacity, when would you be able to enter a property, or would you be able to without sending a letter first?
So entering the property versus entering the building is one thing as well. So I can enter a property if I have reasonable grounds that there's an offense that's taken place.
Right.
Or to investigate a complaint, so the entering the dwelling itself, I would have to have consent from the occupant of the building, or a warrant to enter the building. So there's a difference that I need to distinguish in that. But yeah, it would be based on a complaint basis, and I'd have to have reasonable grounds to be there.
And I realize and appreciate you're not our fire chief, but do you happen to know if there's different access rules? If the fire were to be following up on a capacity issue?
I don't know what their requirements are, unfortunately.
Okay.
Sorry to make you walk so far for this, but.
I'll make it worth your while. So we were talking about a complaint, so that's the reactive piece, right?
Mhm.
That we react to a complaint or something like that.
Yep.
What about if it was proactive activity on the part of bylaw in the township? To look at another source and see a commercial property, what's essentially a commercial property being operated. What's being advertised is clearly over capacity. So, 2 bedrooms, but it sleeps 15, that sort of thing. If you or somebody from the township was to see that and be able to document that, does that give you any any additional grounds to enter the property and or the building.
It would give us grounds potentially to enter the property, not the building. The building still stays the same, be by consent or by warrant.
So, but it would still, what about to open an investigation?
To open an investigation, we'd have to look at our policy as to whether we are proactively searching everything to see who's complying and who's not. Our policy right now is based on complaint,
Mhm.
and that's, you know, also backed up by our lawyer's recommendation.
The reason I ask is because in the recommendations, the draft as it's written now is that the committee would be recommending proactive activity. Where it wouldn't be necessarily specifically in terms of ghost hotels and capacity issues.
So that would be something that we'd have to go back to our lawyer to get a recommendation on. I think he's already provided a recommendation on complaint versus proactive in his legal opinion earlier.
I'm not trying to be a stick in the mud here, but it may actually be an opportunity where we need to add another bylaw, because I don't think it's actually illegal to put your listing on Airbnb, 3 bedrooms for 15 people. It's illegal when 15 people arrive to the property and are in those bedrooms and occupying them.
Yeah.
So would you think it would be of assistance to you if there was a bylaw that mentioned that any advertisements need to be within the
We'd have to
provincial
run that,
standards?
we'd have to run that by the solicitor.
Yeah.
You know, it's our solicitor has mentioned in the past too, that it's very active, like there's an active, how do I phrase this? There's decisions being made every day in the courts that affect how things are enforced across the province. And every decisions affect how other municipalities then deal with, you know, cases that come up. So, you know, it's key to have our lawyer provide guidance to us on how we're going to deal with situations. Because they're familiar with the court decisions.
So we're trying to avoid court-based process. And if it's unavoidable to enforce bylaws without the hurdle of a court-based process, then we may have to strike that whole section and go straight to registration and or licensing. If bylaws
So I'm
can be
not-
enforced, unless there's an extremely high court-based judicial type hurdle, then we may have to change our draft.
So when I say that there's court decisions, it's not saying that this is court decisions through our municipality. It's case law and decisions of how municipalities deal with things are based on case law, and those are coming out, you know, regularly, and especially around short-term rentals.
And it seems
you
like
know,
bylaw enforcement is following
Yeah.
a case law-based process.
That's right, yeah.
So we may have to go straight to registration.
So would you?
That whole section is null and void if we can't enforce bylaws unless there's impossibly high hurdles to prove a bylaw has been broken.
But I also do wonder, and again, this isn't criticizing anyone in particular, but how other municipalities have been able to get by this, because that would sort of, I don't disagree with what you're saying there at all, Janet. But if we accepted that, that basically just blows up the entire bylaw enforcement system around the province, and it wouldn't just be a North Kawartha specific problem. So there's something that we need to identify and or change. It's making it more difficult for us to enforce a bylaw compared to other municipalities.
And
Which is
I
why-
assume it's size and resources. Like if it was not a 9 to 5 bylaw enforcement Monday to Friday, if it was 24/7, then it's possible that bylaws could be enforced. But if it's still 24/7, 365, and there's a very high hurdle to prove a bylaws being infracted, then it's again a high hurdle.
Okay,
Is there, without sort of running afoul of any legal issues around whether a property needs to be entered or whether we have right to continue an investigation or make a formal investigation into what we think is a bylaw investigation. If we go back to the specific recommendation, being proactive to discover these particular types of properties, is there a way to reach out once they're identified, and they can be fairly easily? Is it appropriate, and is there a way to even do it where you can reach out to the owner and contact them in writing and say, we see that you have this property advertised. Are you aware that you are, 23 people over capacity or something like that? And an explanation of what that does to the septic system and potentially to lake water quality and all of that sort of stuff, and potentially to fire regulations, without sort of stepping across that enforcement line. Is that something that's doable, in your opinion?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, we could also look at all the Realtor.ca photos of people selling their places to see what work's been done, without permits as well, and to see if they've expanded and put more bedrooms. I'm trying to give you a comparable
Okay,
to what you're asking.
Yeah.
We could check all the Realtor.ca photos and what they're listing the place for as number of bedrooms and compare it to septic systems that aren't even related to short-term rental. But it's a matter of manpower for that too, right? There's got to be manpower to deal with all of the investigation and the follow-up and the complaints or proactive enforcement.
I'm not running away here, and I know this is gonna seem, I'm sorry, go ahead. Shane.
Manpower, I would set the manpower stuff aside for the time being. We realize that there's gonna be resource requirements. However, the township decides to do any of this, that applies to any of these recommendations. So just to not to diminish the importance of it, but just to set that aside, what is possible in terms of, process and I guess if we were to continue to recommend that be that proactive process take place, I guess it would be up to the township then to decide whether they want to extend that to, like you said, every house is for sale.
Yeah.
Every property is for sale in the township. I'm trying to get to the point where what is it that we can do without running afoul of, either case law in terms of bylaw enforcement. And still get the message across to a property owner who is clearly violating what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it if we can't say, well, bylaw has to go in and start documenting and writing the ticket right away. But I'm just thinking that we may not need to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe we recommend, again, manpower aside for the moment, maybe we recommend that those contacts. But I think Airbnb is a little easier to filter than Realtor.ca.
You'd be surprised.
So, coming back to something that Colin said, I just was scribbling. That it's sounding like the township's policy isn't really aligning with our recommendation number 2. But Colin, you suggested either a new bylaw or I think amending policy to enable proactive investigations.
Yes.
That could be an added sentence under our second recommendation. So if we amended the township's policy for investigations, which can lead to enforcement. Can't imagine the solicitor saying that the township is unable to amend their own policy to enable proactive investigations.
Yeah, so like I said before, he's provided legal opinion as to whether we should be going out and doing bylaw enforcement without having a complaint. And his recommendation was that it, we shouldn't be going out and doing, but
Sure,
that was in his
he's
legal
he's a
opinion.
lawyer and that's his recommendation. If council decides that they
Yeah.
want to be more proactive, council can do it.
Yeah.
It's under their authority.
Well, and I think that hits it on the head, because if we think that that's the proper avenue to be pursued, that shouldn't encumber us from recommending that. Same as the resource question, if there's a concern about resource, that shouldn't necessarily encumber our recommendation to council either. If in the end, the lawyers and the budget doesn't allow, then okay. And if that's up to staff and council to decide whether they want to adjust either one of those things in order to make it happen.
Mhm.
And I don't want to get away from this one, because I think, given what we saw in the survey, what people are concerned about when we surveyed them, what we've heard from the deputations, this is a big one, and I don't want to lose this one.
But I think this is critical.
Yeah.
Sorry, to cut you off there, but just as a basic exercise, and this is probably gonna seem really basic to be doing this far in. Like, we just have 4 imaginary messages on your phone when you come in after the weekend, and these would be the 4 biggest complaints that, based on our survey, that we would be expecting to see. So what happens when you receive a phone call complaining about noise at a property? Like, what's this process of the steps?
So it'd be contacting the person back to find out more information, I guess. And they would have to submit a written complaint.
So step 1, getting the actual complaint correct, and
Yeah.
our formatting.
Sorry to interrupt, is the written complaint online? Through an
You
online?
can do it through online or email, or it can be dropped off at the office.
So trying to make this a real-time, real-world example of current noise going on and how it's addressed.
And then if somebody goes, does the proper avenues and says there's a Airbnb that's beside me that's making lots of noise consistently, what would the next step be?
So if it's actively going on and I'm, here, that I'll go out to the property. And I did, like I mentioned before, I attended the property, spoke with the individuals that are at the property. And, that was the end. I didn't hear anything back, so.
And if it's sort of constant, and again, I think I made it clear that I have no interest in sending municipal staff to a 3 o'clock alcohol-filled rager. But if it's those types of situations, do you direct the owner to contact the police? Do you help them
Yeah.
with that?
For sure, and that would be part of the initial contact, right? Getting more information. And I would be saying, if you have after hour concerns, please contact the OPP. That's the avenue for that. Even if we had staff that were on 24/7, we're not gonna send a single staff member out on their own to deal with a noise complaint at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I think you'd find that the OPP are also taking more than one person to an instance like that.
Okay.
It's not safe even for OPP to be dealing with that on their own.
And if you attend the site and there is a concern, it sounds like there's lots of people that a conversation isn't actually going to solve the problem. It was continued and ongoing. if you attend the site, notice there's a problem, how do you enforce it if the property owner isn't very cooperative?
Um, well, if it's the property owner or if the tenants or, um. Yeah, I guess, we can take next steps, but next steps would be, laying charges, but.
So you have to officially open the investigation then?
Well, the investigation's already open if I attend the site.
Mhm.
So, investigation open. And I know that Janet has concerns and I don't fully disagree that it's a high bar to clear once. We're forced to go through the court process, so you would just start collecting evidence and.
Yeah, if the noise is ongoing when I'm there, then, that's something that I can be the witness to,
Okay,
right? If it's noise from the previous night, then we'd have to have someone willing to be the witness in court, for that noise.
and then. Something very, this should be getting quicker from here on out, but fire related, would you refer that over to the fire department?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And I'm not saying there should even be, but is there follow-up from your end afterwards, or is it just sent over to the fire department?
So it would be the fire department who would deal with that investigation. Yeah.
Okay. And that one, animal, send to the animal control
That's
officer?
correct, yeah.
And then, I can rock this, sounds negative, but after you send it to the animal control officer, we're done with our process?
That would be their investigation from there, yeah,
Okay.
on behalf of the township.
And this may be a more complicated one, capacity. Actually, we already sort of went over that one, but, would you, I'm sorry.
So the capacity was the tough one. It would be probably more a letter to the property owner, not necessarily a site visit right away. And partially because, I don't know, I show up during the day, like I said before, there's, 5 vehicles in the driveway. Did they arrive that morning? Were they there the night before and got a ride home? Or took a taxi somewhere? Doesn't really provide enough evidence for me to say that they're not using their septic in accordance with the septic permit. I would need further information from the property owner. If I have information based on the listing, then that would be taken up with the property owner as well. If they're listing it as, a 5-bedroom place and it's only designed for 3-bedroom, then, we'd have to have that discussion with the property owner. And usually by way of a letter.
I think it's more that it's a 5-bedroom place and they're listing it for 16 people occupancy. So just straight away in contravention to bylaws, just on the ads.
The advertisement, if attended as is, would be a contravention, but I do think it's worth figuring out if we are able to
So the
regulate the
advertisement
advertisement.
doesn't necessarily create the offense though, because you'd actually have to have
Right. And so
the
it's,
people there that are in excess of 10 people, staying there. The advertisement, I mean, to me, that's a flag for sure. And that's something to address with the property owner and say, based on your advertisement, you're advertising that you could be exceeding your septic approval. It's not the infraction though. The
correct.
infraction is actually using the septic, not in accordance with the septic permit.
Right. And so then is the ad another piece of evidence, I guess?
It could be another piece of evidence for sure, yeah.
And so I'm not gonna pretend that I got, first off, bylaws at Matt's primary sort of focus with his role, and I'm not gonna pretend that tiny little list over there sort of summarizes all he does in bylaw. But what I would say, having gone through it, is like, to me, it is just resources and time. None of those items are particularly complicated. I don't think the hurdle is as high as we think it is. If we're able, based on a complaint, to open investigation, head over, the steps themselves aren't overly onerous or complicated. But when you're doing two major roles before you're thinking about bylaw, I can absolutely see why it's not actively or being done as quickly as some people would like it. So I think it just highlights the fact that it is a big resource issue that council will have to try to address. That's my thoughts, having gone through that. Ian?
I'll go back. A little bit, this can be a win for council. If they play it right. Council says, we're amending our enforcement policy to enable a proactive, enhanced response because of short-term rentals. And then the public sees that and says, oh, they're actually doing something about short-term rentals. And now I get Matt's concern, the solicitor would want to review the new township policy around investigations and proactive activities, but again, solicitor's opinion is simply an opinion as it relates to being in court. We're talking here about more of a negotiated outcome.
Yeah, so that opinion would likely be brought before council, for their, use as the.
But I think a 24-hour response line and an amended policy to enable this, stage 2, is a win.
Otherwise, it's a straight to registration and amps.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a major issue. We can recommend that amending any policy or bylaw we like. It's just a recommendation from this group.
Mhm.
Can
And the
we,
others, if it
can we
does,
see this enforcement policy in writing? It exists in the policy book for North Kawartha. Is it a public document?
Probably not. It's probably based on the solicitor's, recommendations in the past. So I don't think we have a written policy for this, but it'd be a.
How do you win a court case if you don't have a written policy that supports your entire court-based process?
What do you mean?
Well, if staff don't have the authority from council to go out and issue provincial offenses acts based on a policy to be reactive to inspections, I don't understand how that can be. Connie maybe has the history.
Connie?
It's our bylaws that allow for the enforcement. But I don't believe there is a specific policy that in writing adopted by council. At least recently that I recall that would say it is our written policy that we do this, but it's knowledge and case law gained over the years. One aspect that maybe hasn't been mentioned is municipalities have to treat everyone equally and fairly. We'll often come up, what you do for one, you do for all, because we represent all of the people and the property owners. So I think that's where, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, if we're going to pick these couple of rental sites to be checking, then maybe we pick the real estate sites. Are we including them all? Are we being fair? Are we unfairly targeting a particular group? Those are things that are important too. We have to be fair.
So that would
Yeah.
then be in the implementation plan.
But we have our bylaws already in place, which committee members have reviewed. Those are the bylaws enacted by council that we need to follow for enforcement. So
I think where it
I think Shay
bifurcates,
makes some good points, and you as well. These are recommendations to council. So what I'm seeing here is, committee looking for ways to show that things are being enforced and also to collect information, which it's a phase-in process really that we're taking, committee is recommending to take these steps, which ultimately could lead to some sort of licensing bylaw. So I suppose council, you know, they would look at all those aspects, like, do they want to do 24/7? Do they want to take a more proactive approach? We have in the past, right? Twice we've hired enforcement agencies to come and take on enforcement activities. And I think typically then that follows up to our staff to follow those through, because a court process can take a long time, years
Mhm,
in some cases.
mhm.
And there have been processes to follow up on these situations where someone is, you know, operating short-term rentals and there's been reports and violations and. So it's
I hear
not
what
that,
you're, yes, sorry, I hear
Hold
what
on one
you're
minute,
saying.
Janet. We'll let Connie finish here.
Yeah.
Connie?
that's okay, she can go ahead, that was basically it.
Okay, Janet?
Thanks, sorry to interrupt, and I appreciate what you're saying, Connie, because you are the history and the continuity for us, and appreciate your perspective. I do very much agree, and I think this committee does agree, that if you do want to treat everyone fairly, and where you don't focus on one particular group, the bylaws and recommendations are for all. I think where it bifurcates, if you may feel like, Matt, you need to go on realtor.ca to see if there's a cottage that's fitting too many family members, and if that's against septic and fire code. And again, that proactive information that we could provide as a committee to all residents would be educational for all. I think where we bifurcate is if there is commercial use in a residential zone, it's already counter to the zoning bylaws. And from there is where, if there's 365, 24/7, constant, egregious against bylaws, I think that's what we're trying to address here. And
So I
it's
think-
not the mom
I
and
think the
pop,
lawyer,
it's not the owner, it's not the renter, it's the commercial activity, the commercialization of residential. And if we're going to be fair to all, how are we being fair to hotel, motel owner operators who have to jump through many hoops when the exact same activity and commercial activity is going on in an Airbnb?
so I believe the lawyer's opinion also addressed the commercial activity versus residential activity. And that was a while back, and I believe Laura Stone may have some comment to that as well, with regards to the use of the property and being commercial versus residential. And I
Understood.
believe
Yeah.
John Ewert's, you know, the opinion and based on court rulings was that a short-term rental is not necessarily deemed commercial, just because the property is being rented out, it's still a residential use.
Correct. And recognizing that the mom and pops that rent out is a completely different animal than a hotel being operated in a residential zone that just happens to not be called a hotel. But is looking like a duck, walking like a duck, talking, quacking like a duck.
Just, I'm not sure the question of fairness even enters into this. And because if you identify an issue, whether it's a bylaw issue or whether it's some other issue in the township, you don't, you know, if you came to my neighbor and had an issue with his garage that was built without a permit, say, that wouldn't mean that you would go to all the other neighbors and investigate them too, just to be fair. Because that wouldn't make sense. You've identified a problem, so you go and you deal with that issue. Same thing applies here, I think. It's not about fairness. It's the issue gets identified. It's been identified by us. If you go back and look at the survey, it's identified there. Look at any of the research documentation, it's identified there. it's not unfair in my mind to go and target that. And investigate that and spend some time and resource on it if it's available or if you can make it available. I don't think fairness enters into it. And to your comment about looking at realtor.ca to see how many houses have had extra building or extra bedrooms built onto them or garages built or whatever that haven't been permitted. That really doesn't have anything to do with this. I mean, if you really wanted to be fair to everybody, every time you investigated a single instance, you'd investigate the whole township, and that's not what we're talking about here. I don't think fairness is the question. And I think it's you identify the problem, so you go and attend to that problem, or if it's an issue that may affect several properties, you go and identify that, or you go and investigate that. I'm not sure where the concern with being fair to the rest of the property owners would come into it.
So what was being asked was to do a proactive enforcement based on doing web searches to find out if somebody is overusing their septic based on the Airbnb platforms. So that could also be said about Realtor, right? The same, it's a exact same situation is a property that's being advertised on realtor.ca. Is it being advertised as for sale as something that it shouldn't be? Is the property being overused, or the septic being overused based on what they're trying to sell it for? Did they do work to that property, create an additional living space in a garage that shouldn't be there? Put more bedrooms in, finish a basement, put more bedrooms in. We're talking about the exact same situation as what we're talking about for Airbnbs, or I shouldn't say Airbnbs, short-term rentals.
Okay.
So you're asking me to, or what you're proposing is for us to go and do web searches to identify properties that have septics that are being overused. That should also be compared to, other resources such as using realtor.ca to find the same situation on properties that aren't short-term rentals.
Okay, and Shane, I too really struggle with this proactive thing, especially thinking about other municipalities. Like, how many parking enforcement officers work in the city of Toronto? That is all proactive enforcement. If they do a ticketing blitz on University Avenue, it doesn't make every ticket that's given outside of that area, like, we're not being unfair to people on University Avenue by doing that. Municipalities have a chance to see a problem, identify the problem, and fix the problem with bylaw enforcement. And I'm even wondering, like, there's a disconnect in my mind, because I thought as a provincial offenses officer, if something was noticed, a provincial offenses officer is obligated to act on it. And that, in my mind, would alone be proactive enforcement, not waiting for a complaint.
So if we're talking bylaw, so we would have to maybe get this opinion from John, and I think he's actually commented on it, and maybe not this legal opinion, but another one. The municipality is not obligated to enforce their bylaw. So it's
Crazy in my mind.
and not say, I mean, there's situations where the municipality can say, we're not enforcing that. Is it good practice? Probably not. But a municipality, there's case law that municipalities are not obligated to enforce a bylaw. I have an obligation as a chief building official to enforce the Building Code Act and the building code. So which is different from bylaws. So we need to make sure that there's that differentiation. So I've been charged by the municipality to enforce the Building Code Act and the building code, as well as bylaws. But they're two different legislative, I guess you could say, issues.
I'm gonna jump ahead and come back. one of my notes for later in the meeting was to discuss a letter to council. Providing some color around our recommendations, and some of this sounds like it's better placed in a letter to council. Than in our recommendations. That gives us the leeway to provide some color to council without. That letter necessarily being released to the public because it's a communication between this committee and council. And we can raise the issue of fairness. We can also raise the issue of the economic impact of these recommendations and say, we understood these issues here, but we felt very strongly that this proactive element needed to be in for short-term rentals. And maybe it causes issues for other parts of the municipality, but if you can't do this, then Janet's right, we're going straight to registration. Which is way bigger.
Well,
Then-
you can make the recommendation to council. That's what you're,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, it's theirs to reject. If staff tell them we can't afford it unless you double our budget. They may well reject it.
And when, again, not saying that little list actually reflects the entirety of the work, but when it's that simple, I feel like we're missing a really big opportunity to simply better resource the group. And to just say, oh, you know what, because we don't have the resources, we're just going to give up on it. Like, I think that's a massive missed opportunity.
Well, and we haven't really touched on it here, but if there's all of this massive economic benefit to the township. In terms of short-term rentals, then surely some of that is filtering into the tax base. Probably not, because it's almost entirely under the table. Except for buying lumber for the new bedroom.
Any questions for Matt? Because I certainly appreciate that you've been here for longer than I anticipated, but you had lots of good information.
so if I could, you said. That. You know, potentially removing that proactive out of your recommendation. If you remove it, then it's not even a recommendation for council to
Mhm.
consider.
Right.
Right?
But then we would be at registration. Which would ask that you set up a registration program to try and capture all 700 short-term rentals.
Yeah.
In North Kawartha, and that staffing that and websites and
Yeah.
even if it's a self-registration process. It's
So and that
gonna
would,
cost way more than a few dozen proactive inspections.
then that would be up to council to, you know. Consider as well.
Yeah, and with this recommendation, we tried to provide a soft landing. For a way to deal with the issue without going straight into a registration program.
Looks like it's not possible.
I can try not to sort of add to the negativity and impossibility, but I will point out that I've gone back over, I didn't check our last meeting, but for the entirety of 2025. According to the reports that we're getting with the departmental numbers, there's been 0 bylaw enforcement. Files closed. So it's clearly,
How many are open?
well, in my mind, it's well out of control if we know. There have to be hundreds and hundreds of these infractions happening, and we're not able to capture any of them.
Right.
So, to bring clarity to that, we only started, differentiating between bylaw and building. In the last 2 months, I believe. So our enforcement files were all lumped into the same, building and bylaw, and there has been files closed over the years.
That's definitely news to me, because I thought I remember going back to January and still, it got separated into its own departmental report, but the data was still available. From that report. I could totally be wrong.
Who's gonna bring us home here?
Yes, are we?
Well, if bylaws have no teeth and bylaw enforcement has no teeth, we go to registration and AMPS as a recommendation. If we can't do that soft landing that Ian described, if it doesn't seem possible,
It just comes back to the fundamental purpose of bylaw enforcement to begin with, like, we can't just. If it came forward to council, it's all right if it's the recommendation of everyone else. I am not going to say, yeah, you know what? It's just too much for bylaws. We're a small municipality, we're not able to handle it, so. Yeah, just leave it as is. That's not gonna fly with me.
no, but it speaks to why many municipalities went straight to registration in the first place.
Yes. Potentially.
I don't think we should abandon it. I think whether it's for the purposes of a soft landing, as Ian says, which is quite right. If this committee is of the consensus, that is the right thing to recommend to be done. With the restrictions around resourcing and everything else. I think it should stay pretty much as is. It would be up to council, staff, township, whoever, to look at adjusting policy, creating new policy, resourcing, you know, whether it's bylaw enforcement or administration around bylaw enforcement. That's completely up to them, whether they want to do that or not. I'm not willing to support pulling a recommendation out, or this particular recommendation out, just because we think there may be no action on.
Well, then we could maybe
I-
write to the, write another paragraph or two around what Matt's described as far as the very difficult hurdles to execute stage 2 and how we believe that may require either a policy, a bylaw change, or an enforcement changes. Or a wholesale relook at hurdles of burden of proof for bylaw infractions.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, I use the words amend township policy, I mean, but we can add a paragraph that says, yeah, this is gonna require. And trigger change when adopted by council. That has repercussions, ripples, perhaps through the rest of the township. I don't know how it operates, but. Sounds to me like it's a good time for council to look at some of their major policies and see what needs to be modernized.
I absolutely agree, but yeah. Any other?
So we sort of landed on adding some text.
Yeah.
In stage 2 to make it. Pickable. Yeah. Sorry, Matt. It is what it is. Some of it is circling back, and I would recommend while we're making edits that. Under stage 6, we make it clear that if council determines not. To implement stages 2, 3, and 4. That our recommendation is to jump straight to registration.
Yeah.
So failing to implement 2, 3, and 4 means registration.
Yeah.
We add that. I had a question, I think I stuck in an email somewhere, but. To my knowledge, North Portage doesn't currently register any commercial activities in the township, so it. Registration program for short-term rentals would be the very first registration program. You don't register garages or gas stations or. Hotels.
Is it a group home registry we have?
Do that.
So that's it.
A group home registry, okay,
I think that's from my recollection.
It's the only one I'm aware of.
is that right?
And we just have one group, so it's. But
It's simple
did every
registration.
year and, you
And I
know,
think that came from a requirement from the ministry or something,
I
did it
believe
not?
so, yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and just to get the correct information on the record here, I do acknowledge that the enforcement files was separated into building and bylaw on the last two. But it also doesn't change the fact that 0 is 0, so if there's 0 for both of them, we know that there is 0
Or
for.
there was more earlier in the year though. Like that goes by month. It doesn't have a year to date. I don't think.
Yeah.
Is that right? It doesn't have a year to date on there.
It didn't have the year to date, but
No.
the number of closed files being 0 consistently means that it would be
Well-
impossible for any of the bylaw enforcement files to be closed.
There was ones closed earlier in the year.
Okay.
And here's the other thing is, I don't necessarily review every file every month to see if things have changed, which maybe I should make a process to do that. So there may have been ones that are closed that, you know, the file hasn't officially been closed in our system. So. Yeah.
So do we need to go through, pick a little bits of language that we want updated on it and try to give it to you in a more summarized form here, Connie?
Yeah, so I just have the two changes now, which was, under stage 6. Fitting in here somewhere that failing implementation of stages 2, 3, and 4, committee recommends to council a licensing program. And the other item was the one you mentioned, change the wording, so it's the overuse of septic systems leads to elevated phosphorus levels as seen in Muskoka, triggering algae blooms, etc. And we need the citation for that. So we could take a look through the document and kind of put it in our typical format for recommendation to council and maybe just tweak anything we see. I think we could probably work to reword that section on being proactive a little bit differently based on what committee members have said, and maybe bring it back to the next meeting more in a finalized version and have committee review it again, if that would assist you.
Yeah, I thought there was, it may not be,
That would have been my third specific
Thing?
amendment, to add a paragraph in stage 2 and to really bring forward that need for policy change.
Yeah,
if there isn't a policy for the investigations, should we have that brought to our attention at the next meeting? So then that gives 4 or 6 weeks for them to figure out if there is one. We're obviously not going to start the bylaw enforcement policy ourselves, but that would be a needed recommendation in our draft.
This might become a sort of a black hole though, too, I suspect, and I don't imagine this township is different from many other small townships, maybe many other townships of any size, where in the absence of policy, common practice has been in use over a certain period of time, and there isn't any policy built around it. And to go in and start picking apart that common practice and trying to attach policy to all of it, you'd need 4 more people to do that in the next 6 months sort of thing. So I don't know. I guess I struggle with our mandate to dictate or to get very specific around policy change. Not sure whether we even need to go there or not. Again, I go back to, we make the recommendation with as much detail as we can, and with, you know, with the changes that we've mentioned, it's up to council and staff after that to decide, okay, if we want to go ahead and implement this recommendation, we have to do, you know, some policy analysis, some changes, some additional policies. We may want to cut out some things that we were doing that we don't want to do. All of that sort of thing would happen later, and none of that would be, we couldn't recommend some of those things specifically because we just don't know.
Yeah, and going back to the policy, you know, there may not be a written policy, you know, signed by council directing staff to do this, and this. for enforcement. We do have on our website, you know, the requirement to, you know, provide your information, and that, you know, we don't accept anonymous complaints, that sort of thing is on the forms as well. So is it, you know, a specific policy signed by council? No, and it's based on a, you know, historic and, like you said, common practice from other municipalities and legal advice from our solicitor. So we had to have a, you know, specific policy around that, then no.
Okay.
The,
Sorry.
the issue with common practice is it tends to go a little bit like this. And, you know, even to speak to the question of fairness, through common practice, if you don't treat two similar cases the same way, and common practice may dictate that you don't, then someone is guaranteed to come back to you. Somebody from the legal side is gonna come back and say, show me your policy on how to do this, in order for me to defend the complaint against you, and you're not gonna have it. I've run into this a million times, and I've been in your seat, you know, talking about it, and it's very difficult for administration to support certain activities, and this gets worse as time goes on. It's very difficult for them to support your activities if there aren't clear policies, or as clear policies as you can make them, in how to approach some of these things. What's our policy on investigation? What's our policy on, you know, any one of 100 different things? And if those aren't written down, common practice may not be wrong, but if you don't write it down, it's not policy. So that's where it gets pretty difficult, and I think,
I agree. I think common practice, for example, if it has to be a non-anonymous complaint, and we've heard from a deputant saying, I don't feel safe making a non-anonymous complaint, but that's common practice and not policy, then, you know, it's again speaks to fairness. If someone's feeling vulnerable by lodging a complaint, then is that fair that they can't?
Yeah, and I don't know, I actually think that for investigations, there should be a policy crafted. While I
Yeah.
would typically agree with the sentiment about not wanting to overly complicate it, but this is where common practice has got us today, and the results based on the number of cases we're able to close. We need to have a policy. If we don't have a policy, we can't question why it's not being done. And I think that's an important option feedback loop to have, is being able to say, hey, look, we've got a policy for enforcement. Why do we have 0 files closed?
And if you don't have a policy, then staff aren't able to calculate the fiscal impact of that activity. Because they don't know what's being expected. So then your activity fits within your budget envelope instead of requesting the budget envelope that follows your policy.
And Janet, I saw your hand. Or did I? I don't think so.
Blowing my nose, sorry.
Yeah.
and sometimes policy is just the common practice written down, you know, so that you can show it to somebody and say, here, this is our policy, and we do this consistently. Anyway,
Well, in this case, our policy, whether it's written down or not, is based on our legal advice from our solicitor, and that is in writing, so, you know,
Yeah,
fair comment,
yeah.
it's just, if, especially in this sort of space, in the public sector space.
Yeah.
If you haven't got it written down, you can't prove it to anybody.
Mhm.
You know, you can't support it. It's very, very difficult, but again, not for this committee to solve that problem.
Can we have that document added to the next agenda, the one with the opinion that mentions that about proactive enforcement?
I have already emailed the legal that John gave to the committee, but I think it was a little more centered around, the zoning. I pulled it up, I just,
He does mention it near the end of.
Yeah.
It's-
so I did email that to everyone. He talks about the Ormond-Dante issue. Our forms, when you get to the next one, you will see that our forms do have that statement, which, that is the opinion of our solicitor, that we should include that statement. And when I last, the statement regarding anonymous complaints. And when I last spoke to him, it is a newer approach based on, I think, some case law that he said, you know, that's what you really should have on your forms. Anonymous complaints are very difficult to enforce because you don't have a witness and it's hard to.
I think the other side of it is to prevent harassment. Like,
Yeah.
you know, if I'm targeting a certain property and I keep going back to that same property and there's somebody 3 or 4 houses down the road that has a similar situation, but I'm only dealing with that one. I'm there based on a complaint, and it's not because I'm personally targeting that person. And that's, you know, I've been involved in a case where it was acting on a complaint, but I was accused of harassment because I was dealing with that complaint. Because I went back and I was trying to get them to address that issue. So, you know, that protection of having a complaint to say, I'm dealing with a complaint, it's nothing to do with you as an individual or your property or how I view your property. I'm acting on a complaint that we have a written, you know, complaint for. And that's, from my side, that's my protection, is having an actual complaint from somebody saying, you know, I have a concern with this and I would like this addressed. If I'm going out and targeting a property, could be because I have a beef with the neighbor. You know, it could be I have a beef with the person, or I, you know, or that's how it's viewed, right? That I don't like that person for a certain reason. And I have to take a very, you know, calculated approach based on, I have a complaint. You're to address the complaint, I'm gonna address it the same way as I address, you know, this other complaint that's similar, rather than, you know, I'll pick this property today, you know, and go and address things on this property, and, you know, it's.
So. In terms of what we were talking about for proactive, so I'm picking off an Airbnb list. If I, as a resident, call you and say, I found 15 properties listed here that are all being listed, advertised at over their capacity.
Yeah.
Is that a complaint?
Very likely could be. Yes.
So then you go look at all 15, is that the only way that this would play out?
As we have time.
Yeah, okay.
So,
But is that the way it would play out?
yeah, so dealing with 2 right now, so, yeah.
Okay.
As long as the complaint is legitimate, I don't see how it would still be considered harassment though.
Right,
Like if,
well, that's what I mean.
Yeah, be substantiated.
But
yeah, so
if
personally,
there's nobody to say, you know, here's a name on this, and it's just an anonymous complaint, who's to say that I didn't just say, yeah, well, I've got a complaint on this, and, you know, I don't have anything in writing from somebody saying that they had the issue, then who's to say it's not me that has the issue? And I'm targeting somebody, so for lack of a better word, but
So in the municipal world, there are certain policies we're required to have. There's quite a lot. The Municipal Act sets out some, and we do have all of those policies. I have on occasion gotten calls from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to check to see that we have those policies. So you're right. I mean, there's things that have happened that take place over the years that become a practice. Another example might be where someone does come in with a complaint and they ask, I don't want to give my name. They may be advised that we were not going to provide that information to the person that is being complained about.
unless it
That's
goes to court.
confidential unless it goes to court. We have been challenged with that through freedoms of information. At the end of the day, that particular one was, I suspect, not followed through by the individual requesting after they dealt through the process with the privacy commissioner. So staff, I don't want committee to have the impression that we're not doing these things. We are very active in doing these things in the building department. All of staff are. If we receive calls from ratepayers with complaints, they are taken seriously. and followed up within our ability. I wanted to mention as well, that we do have in there on our website, we have codes of conduct for council, for staff, for the building inspector. That was, that's been in place for a while, 2012. And there is procedures in that. There's a policy statement. It doesn't specifically address that we act only on complaint, but it does indicate apply all relevant building bylaws, codes and standards appropriately and without favor. Always act in the public interest, particularly with regard to safety of building works and structures, not to act where there may be or where there may be or may reasonably appear to be a conflict between their duties to their employer, their profession, their peers, public at large and personal interests. Perform their inspections, plan examination duties impartially and in accordance with the highest professional standards. So there's more items listed on there. These are all on our website. So you can, look through those as well if it is of assistance, but we have a lot of policies, a lot of procedures. We may not have captured them all because it's just been things that have been the practice. But there's nothing to stop, this committee from making what they feel is the best recommendation to council for consideration. You've done a lot of work, you've done a lot of research, and I think you're working towards this final report, which is good. And when it goes forward to council, committee members can certainly attend the meeting to provide input and ask questions and.
I was gonna ask later, how do we actually get it from here over there?
Yeah, so once the committee is satisfied that this is your final recommendation and you've completed the terms of reference, it would be provided on a council agenda. Typically, the chair would speak to it or present it, but committee members can attend.
Mhm.
And I could see council, posing some questions, having some discussion.
And I'll bring the opinion back anyways, but I'm really struggling to see where this is stopping us from proactive by
Yeah,
law
I think
enforcement.
I emailed it
Yeah, no, but for the next meeting for discussion.
to put it on the, yeah, can do that.
Well, we still have Nat and we talked about the new web page, which I liked. You got a big check mark.
I can't take responsibility
Okay,
for that.
whoever your web
But I-
person is, did a nice job.
But you will.
But I said, yes, it looks good.
Alright, and the conversation got me wondering whether I should even bring this up, but as somebody who has made a complaint in the past and, I was advised that my name would be withheld from the person I complained about, which made me feel more comfortable making the complaint. But then to hear again that if it actually does get to court, which is highly, highly unlikely, I would have to appear in court and
Potentially.
so we're trying to encourage people to make real, informed complaints so that we get good statistics on these issues. And I wondered about adding in the sentence that your identity will be withheld to protect your privacy or concerns about retribution or something, because I don't think people realize that your identity when you make a complaint is actually kept confidential until such time as you appear in court.
Right.
And I think it would be an encouraging thing to add that statement.
But there was something, we had something to that effect on our old bylaw enforcement form, and I don't know if it was. I'm trying to think if it was brought through on that. But it essentially, I mean, yeah, we keep the confidentiality of the complainant. And not every complaint, if it did go to court, would require the witness to be there either. Noise would be one where, yes, it would be required if they're the only ones that heard it. A dog running at large, for instance.
Sure, things are
If
fine.
it was no longer running at large when the animal control showed up, it was back on the neighbor's property. or they're back on the owner's property, that sort of thing, then yes, they're the ones that witnessed it and they may have taken pictures. They'd have to say that they're the ones that took the pictures or video of it. But not every complaint would require the complainant to actually attend court.
Right. I just think, yeah, some phrasing around that might help encourage people to make a complaint. Otherwise, I like the new webpage. Streamlined, forms all worked, all the links worked when I went through it. Good.
I had one link that didn't work for me, but that
Oh,
that might be me.
I was clicking on the wrong place that time.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what I was doing.
And if the page is being worked on, sometimes things don't. You know, when you're active on it, if it's being updated at the time, so.
Well, have we landed on 3 edits in the document
I think so.
that staff are going to make
Yeah.
edits and get us a committee draft back in advance for our next meeting, whenever that is, which hasn't been set.
Yeah, will do.
I was going to ask that before we go too much further, that we share an early draft of this with Trent Lakes, who are mentioned in the document, and so that they're specifically informed that they're mentioned. I don't really care whether they have comment or not, but they should know that they're mentioned as possible partners.
The only one that I've still got remaining then, and it may be that your 3 points covered it, and I just can't put it together in my head, would be specific for pulling information online from Realtor or Airbnb and using that information to prompt the investigation, and whether that needs to be written into bylaw or whether that itself could sort of prompt an investigation. Was there a desire to get more information on that, or?
But I think we agreed to write a new paragraph under stage 2 that said that
Okay,
to enable the proactive inspections, there may need to be a policy shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To enable the use of digital information. To launch an investigation, something like that, I'm sure.
Yeah. And if,
no, that makes total sense to me, but Janet?
yeah, exactly. Sorry, I'm agreeing. And if not, that we'd have to proceed straight to stage.
And Edward's already got it written down on the whiteboard next to his desk, so.
I know we sort of jumped ahead to the second item here, so are we able to have a motion to amend the recommendations with the 3 suggested items for the revised draft recommendation, stage 1 to 6, moved by Shane, seconded by Ruth Ann, all those in favor? That is carried, and then now officially moving on to the building bylaw complaint form. That it was a big deal not going in
You want me
order
still here
there.
for this?
I have one amended bylaw that I'd like to raise with you.
I
Yes,
still
The
know.
noise bylaw does not prohibit screaming,
spelling
yelling, or swearing.
It has a section
a
that
general
says noise that was likely to disturb the inhabitants. So,
And then it goes on to list a whole bunch of specifics, but I thought,
yeah,
because we've, in our little corner of the lake. We have several neighbors with young children who start at 8:30 in the morning and don't stop until bed.
mhm,
And it's not, it's not a car, it's not a radio. Or an amplifier. It's just people. That's my only comment.
mhm.
And would you think that there's a point of access where screaming would be an unreasonable burden upon a neighbor who is going on all the time?
It's kind of subjective, isn't it?
Might be something the courts would have to rule on.
Yeah, yeah.
So, along with some video.
Yeah, there's like a kid standing at your property line screaming at you just to try to make you angry, then I would have to think that it's not allowed, but if it's playing around in the pool and screaming, that's a much more tricky situation.
Yeah, so I think it'd be something, yeah, that,
But the intent and,
yeah, I mean. Unfortunately, noise is a very subjective thing, and what is grating on one person is not grating on somebody else. And. You know, there's construction as well, right?
Mhm.
And construction in our bylaw can start at 5 o'clock in the morning. So some people may say that that's not acceptable. And others would say that that's the nature of construction. So. Yeah,
Yeah, oh, I just make a comment. That's our major issue. There are two properties that are separated by a property in the middle.
Yeah.
And both properties had tents on the property while the kids were up for the summer vacation, and so the noise pretty much lasted all of July and all of August from both of those properties. A total of 9 screaming children.
yeah, and that, it's just one of those very gray zones where you think, is it illegal or is it unneighborly?
Certainly the latter.
Yeah. It generally looks quite good. Was it Kelly that put it together? Did
So, oh,
the
yeah,
website
Yeah.
updates?
yeah. Yeah, usually our process is Kelly's our website administrator, so we put forward the task to her, and then staff in the clerk's department will review it as well, and then we send it to the manager, of whatever other department is involved. So Matt reviewed it and
Right, and this is getting into the weeds, it probably will be done here anyway, but like, do we confirm the identity or do we just assume that as soon as somebody signs this, that?
well, there is a pros, I mean, we can look at GIS information to see if it's somebody that's even remotely like close by.
Yeah. But if I
So.
put a complaint in under Ruth Ann's email and name, is there a process that's gonna catch that she actually didn't submit that?
Well, if I call you for more information and you pick up and not Ruth Ann, then
That would be one,
that
yeah,
might be a problem.
yeah, I agree there, but is that part of our process, or that only,
Here right now.
only if there's a
We
more
are, we
concern?
often call.
You often
for-
call?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
for additional information.
Yeah, I just wanted to check that one while we had you here.
Yeah.
Jake?
Just a couple of comments, and I think the bylaw complaint form wasn't the issue I ran into. It was under, it has a heading, noise complaints.
Mhm.
And if you wanna contact the bylaw enforcement officer, when you click that link, if you're not using sort of Microsoft Outlook for email or anything, it tries to give you a direct link to an email client.
Yep.
And that's where it fell off a cliff for me because I don't use any of those other clients.
Oh, okay.
So, what I don't know whether this is possible or not, but do you know how they do the, when you wanna email a counselor? There's a sort of a generic.
Yeah.
Kind of thing under their sort of job description or something, I can't remember
Yeah.
where it is now. Where you could just put in your name and what you wanna say to the counselor, and somewhere in the background, it folds that into an email and sends it off. You don't need a specific email client, or doesn't have to point you to a specific email client, just like a comment. I'm sure if you wanted to get the bylaw enforcement officer, I know I'd be able to figure it out. Sooner or later I would get to you, but I think that might be a little confusing. Second point was, it said, noise complaints outside of business hours, please contact Ontario Provincial Police. When I clicked on that link, it takes you right to the homepage of I think. Yeah, it's not Peterborough County, it's the homepage for OPP Ontario.
Yeah. With their 188 number, 188,
Oh, there it is.
310,
Never mind.
22.
Never mind. Yeah. Oh. Sorry, I didn't see that when I did it the first time. Cause I was gonna suggest link straight to something that just blasts that non-emergency number straight up. So that's the one you call.
Yeah.
Cause it does say up there too, dial 911 for emergency, and you don't really want people doing that.
If it's an emergency.
Not a noise complaint.
Not a noise complaint, but if it's emergency, yeah.
If it's an emergency, yes, but not for a noise complaint. Other than that, was fine.
I like just having the one form compared to the two that we had before, so I think there's lots of good improvements here. And as long as you've taken a look and it satisfies
Yeah,
your need.
we'll take a look at that link and see if we can, do something different there, similar to what you were saying with contacting. Now, I think in the case where you have a drop down, you put your name and everything in there, right?
Mhm,
Well,
yeah,
that's similar to what we've got in the form, so if they wanna put that in the form and send it off, it'll go to me. But if they're wanting to just email me,
yeah,
just something with a question, then it's.
because we're specifically saying to learn more about the difference between an official bylaw complaint and reporting a concern, please email the bylaw enforcement officer. That's sort of outside the form.
Yeah,
And same for the noise complaint thing is, the form's not mentioned, it's just that if you wanna make a noise complaint, contact the bylaw enforcement officer during business hours with this link. So,
okay, we'll take a
yeah,
look
yeah,
at that.
yeah, cause I think there's some people that are gonna click on that like me and don't know what to do with that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll look into that. Appreciate the feedback.
Feedback, I got lots of.
So then a motion to receive the discussion and make suggestions for technical improvements on the website. Bonnie? That work?
I think so, yeah, and basically what I'm hearing is it just for us to look in to see if we can get that pop-up box where they can directly submit. So we'll look into that. If it's something we can easily do without needing to make some big change with our website provider, then we'll do that. for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know how many boxes they allow, but it is already on the website, so we know that the software is capable of it at least, yeah.
Yeah, so if it's there, we should be able to do it. So the motion is that committee receive the discussion regarding the complaint page on the website. And make the amendments as suggested for technical improvements. Is that okay?
Shane moving that, seconded by Ruth Ann, all in favor, that is carried. Agenda one more time here, I don't have any new business arising from notices of motion or notice of motion, correspondence, bylaws, so you'd just be looking to confirm, we'll skip the date and time of next meeting up ahead of adjournment, and I heard there was some difficulty with the 25th. We'd still be meeting all our sort of necessary meetings if we jumped ahead to December the 9th and then got ourselves back on that second Tuesday. That historically has worked well. So did December the 9th work well for everybody as it stands?
I already have it there, is that?
Excellent. And there's nothing conflicting with,
It looks
Council
okay on our
Chambers?
calendar.
yeah, I don't see anything, the 10th maybe, but not the 9th.
So that's Tuesday, December 9th at 1 p.m.
One of them, yeah.
And nothing in November then.
I don't know. Is the, if we try to do it, there'd be conflicts with everyone that I've been able to find. But are you all right for that date, Shane?
Oh, yeah, I'm good in December, yeah. December 9th is fine.
Same.
I'd be looking for, oops,
No, it's to do with something totally different.
okay, looking for a motion to adjourn then. Moved by Ian, seconded by Ruth Ann, all in favor that carried. Yeah, you're free to go.